This video is intended as a supplementary piece to the series. If you just want to watch me kill some Colossi and talk about possible interpretations of the text, just skip to the next video and we'll be off to face our next challenge. Here, I really need to sit and discuss the approach of my analysis. I've tossed out some terms and ideas pretty liberally. Semiotics, ludic pressure. I want to explain where I'm coming from, and I hope you'll pardon me the indulgence. This might take a little while. Also, I'm partially reading from a script. First, let's talk about semiotics and what it is. At its core, semiotics is the study of signs. A sign is composed of two parts, a signifier and something that is being signified. There is a form and a concept represented by the form. Now, there's a lot of other definitions of what a sign is, but we're going to use this one as a general frame of reference in our conversation. Our concern for the semiotics in Shadow of the Colossus is concerned with the objects in the space and what those objects mean. Additionally, we're concerned with how they mean. At times in these videos, what I've discussed has come off as little more than simple literary criticisms or vague talks about metaphor. This is, at best, a really reductive notion or representation of semiotics. To quote Umberto Eco, "A sign is used to transmit information, to say or to indicate a thing that someone knows and wants others to know as well." We have a sort of model for this. It starts with a source, goes into a sender, a channel, message, and ends at the receiver. So let's apply that to Shadow of the Colossus and maybe we'll understand it a little better. The source is the very idea of Shadow of Colossus, the sort of spark of creation behind it. The sender is Fumito Ueda, the game's director. The channel is the game itself. The message is whatever might be communicated by the game. And we, the player, are the receiver. There's a message being sent to us from Ueda through the game. And now the tricky part, and the part that we've really been concerned with in this series, is how we might find what that message is, and what signs exist that point us towards that message. Think to our examination of the hawk at the beginning of the game. We came to a conclusion. The hawk was an omen of Wander's upcoming interaction with Dorman. But how did we come to that conclusion? In this case, the hawk was a signifier, and through examination of certain cultural beliefs and other symbolic uses of hawks, we concluded that the hawk signified our notion of a soul. From that signifier, and the context in which it was being used in the game, we further concluded that the hawk that appeared was a portentous image. This is the process of meaning-making. And through the theory, of semiotics, it gets really more complicated than that. This is going to be the basic grounding for our look at the text. When we consider the imagery surrounding Mono, for instance, we're not just concerned with what Mono as a digital image makes us feel, but we're also deeply concerned with what she might signify. And we come to understand that through a close examination of the text. And in this case, all pathways towards meaning are at our disposal. Our interpretation of Dorman is concerned with primal notions of light and dark, as well as allegorical connections to other god figures and comparable myths. Our interpretation of Quadratus came from freaking numerology. I quoted Wittgenstein in the first video of this series. Language disguises thought. Now, Wittgenstein is more concerned with literal words. He famously said once that if a lion could speak, we wouldn't be able to understand it. This is because we wouldn't have a common ground or any mutual signs to use in our communications. In that sense, language can absolutely get in the way of ideas. But Wittgenstein also said that a picture is a fact. And now, at the risk of bastardizing or butchering his meaning, I understand this to mean that images, symbols, and icons contain things which are signified. I don't think that's a controversial reading of what he's saying. Shadow of the Colossus relies very often on images as a way to express facts about the game world. The forms of the colossi are the most apparent expression of this, but we also get it through examining the various spaces that we're in. Still, to have a holistic understanding of a Ueda's message, we do turn to language from time to time. Often this is when we're considering the significance of each Colossus's name. We also get it partially through cutscenes. Even though the language of the cutscenes is this sort of fake language that we don't understand, we understand what is being said through another type of symbol, specifically the subtitles. Outside of these cases, however, Shadow of the Colossus is a game that primarily communicates through images and the symbolic importance that we can find therein. My thesis on this point is not only that it's important that we find meaning, but we understand the ways in which Shadow of the Colossus might express it. Now, this is really important. We need to understand that I can only give my thoughts on the matter. It's up to each player or audience member to undergo the semiotic process and find meaning, both in individual moments and for the work as a whole. All we can ever do is express our own thoughts about imagery and the meanings that we find. To give a strange example of this, in the 2007 film Reign Over Me, the game of Shadow of the Colossus is actually featured pretty predominantly. And in that work, the allegorical connection is between Wander's quest to revive Mono and Adam Sandler's character, his desire to reunite with his wife and his daughter, who were both killed in the 9/11 attacks. Even this is a form of meaning-making on both the fictional part of the character and the actual part of the film's director. It's another use of the text in a way we might not expect, but the sign of the text is being seen, and there's a meaning being imbued to it by the person who sees it. However, games have something that Wittgenstein could never prepare for, or at least I don't think he ever talked about. Interactions. Mechanics. Now, I want to stress that mechanics are not things that we can pull away from the rest of the text entirely. A holistic understanding of games demands that we consider the work that, a game is doing. We need to consider all the work it's doing. The music that plays, the design of the space, the kinesthetics, and all sorts of things. The sum total of these things make up the game. A game is not just the mechanics or the systems. But mechanics are a real, extant thing. They are the modes of interaction allowed to the player by the rules of the game. And all of these modes of interaction also have meaning in them. The limited nature of our ability to hold on to a Colossus, the graceful movements that were permitted when riding aggro, these are mechanics that communicate certain things to us. Often this is just basic information. In the first case, it just helps us understand that Wander is fallible and human. In the second case, we come to understand that Aggro and Wander have some sort of special bond. But mechanics also exert, I believe, a very real force upon the player. This is what I call ludic pressure or ludic tension. It's the application of a force by the game on the player, as expressed through the mechanics, intended to elicit an emotional response. Now, this response can be sophisticated and happen on a higher level, or it can just be a very primal feeling in our gut. Wander's clunky movements and the controls of the game exert a certain force on the player that is meant to impress a kind of existential dread at the smallness of human beings. It wants us to think about the human condition. The shift in locomotion and the literal stiffness that happens in the grip mechanic during the Avion fight creates a very real feeling of anxiety. You can feel it in your gut. This is ludic pressure. It's not just a tension or emotion that comes from observing the multiple facets of the text. It's not just looking at the image and seeing the action and having all of the music play. It's not the sum total of those things. It's the moments where it comes specifically from ludic interactions. This is point number 2. Taken together, we come to understand the main intent of this playthrough, to discuss the ways in which I find meaning in the various signs within the game, and to examine the moments where the game's ludic elements create genuine feelings in me as a player. These things, however, are not prescriptive. My meaning is not going to be your meaning. The type of ludic pressure I feel at a certain point may not be the same as yours. Games are messy, complicated, crazy things. Shadow of the Colossus is a beautiful piece of art, and my main contention is that it is incredibly important as a video game because it allows for meaning making in a very true way, and also has observable ludic tension. When you play it, you can feel the forces that are exerted on you. Now, meaning making is, in itself, a type of play. We play Shadow of the Colossus by figuring out what it all means, just as much as we play it by climbing up a giant and slaying it. Our giant is the text. Our magic sword is our minds. And we go on our own journey as we guide Wander on his own.